St Emilion now, an ancient medieval town with a Roman history, and is being classified as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. In this area, there's about 5,500 hectares of land under vine. They produce about 3 million cases of wine a year from about 600 different producers. Because the small holdings here are very tiny compared to the Medoc, the cooperative is very important, and the one local cooperative has over 200 members. The classification in St Emilion is quite unique for Bordeaux, as in every 10 years it is literally reclassified on the quality of the wines that the chateau produces and sorts them out either into Premier Grand Cru Classé or Grand Crus. So we're at one of the first growth properties in St Emilion. We're at Chateau Ausone, which is classified as a Premier Cru Classé A. So we're right at the base of the limestone escarpment here in St Emilion. We're going to have a walk up the hill and see what we can find. Chateau Ausone takes its name from the Roman poet Ausonius. When the Romans settled here in 48 AD, Ausonius decided to put his house up on the top of this fantastic limestone escarpment. The estate here was taken over really after a long-standing family dispute and is now run by a star winemaker called Alain Vautier. From 95 onwards, he's really been making some absolutely stunning wines. So limestone is really one of the three key soil types that we find in this region. Limestone typically holds a lot of moisture and is quite cool. Very, very appropriate for grape varieties such as Merlot. Merlot doesn't really mind to have wet feet, and it doesn't really mind to be kept relatively cool. It's an early ripening grape variety, so it captures all that heat from the summer. If we were over in the Medoc, we'd see the deep gravel soils where Cabernet Sauvignon is planted, which much prefer to have free draining soils, and the gravel which holds a bit of heat retention for it. So not surprisingly, there's no Cabernet Sauvignon planted here at Ausone. The grape varieties are 50% Cabernet Franc and 50% Merlot. So we're over on the far western side of St Emilion now. We've got well away from the limestone escarpment. We're right in the back plains where it really flattens out and gets very, very level. The most interesting thing about this area is when you start looking at these soils. If you look at that, that's just pure sand. So we've got no gravel in there at all. And traditionally, wines that are produced from this area tend to be quite forward, quite soft, not that exciting. But over the recent years, there's some very talented winemakers here, and with a lot of care and attention, they're starting to make some very exciting wines. For example, we're in the vineyard now of Chateau Rolles Valentin, which is owned by an ex-footballer, an ex-French footballer called Eric Prisset. And the wines of Rolles Valentin have started to be very interesting over the last few years. Chateau Cheval Blanc, a 36-hectare estate right over on the western side of St Emilion on the border of Pomerol. An unusual blend of grape varieties that go into the wine here, 66% Cabernet Franc and up to 34% Merlot. So the second one of the Premier Cru Classé A classifications in St Emilion, along with Chateau Ausone. So since 1998, it has been owned by the Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy Group, run by Bernard Arnault, and the person responsible for making the wines here is Pierre Lerton, who's also over in Chateau Yquem. So we're right over on the border now between St Emilion and Pomerol. Over my shoulder there you can see the brand new winemaking facility at Chateau Cheval Blanc. In this area of St Emilion we find the third type of soil. So we've seen the limestone and we've seen the sand, and over here we start to see this again. We start to see gravel. So this area right on the border of Pomerol is much more of a mixture, a bit of sand, a bit of gravel and clay. Over the last 20 years or so, there's been somewhat of a revolution. There's a kind of a movement that are known as garagistes, and this kind of refers to very, very small scale winemaking, which is literally made in a lot of producers' own garages. Unofficially, this started in 1979 with Château Le Pin. So this was made by Jacques Tiempon, whose family owns Vieux Château-Certain over in Pomerol. So a tiny estate, maybe 2 hectares in size. And really what he did is, since he was making wine on such a small scale, he really had attention to detail at all levels of winemaking and started to make very, very sort of micro cuvee wines. The soils over on the right bank really do determine the grape variety used. And the predominant variety here is Merlot, with up to 75 to 80% being used in the blends, along with some of the Cabernets, Franc and Sauvignon. This makes the wines slightly less tannic than Cabernet Sauvignon based styles of wine, but saying that, the wines are still long-lived and very elegant. Classic dishes to serve with this style of wine would be things like beef Wellington, leg of lamb or roast beef. So simple, refined food without any heavy sauces. Great vintages over in St Emilion of late have been the 1998 vintage, the 2000, 2005 and the 2010 vintage.